What is up, my fellow creatives out there, and welcome to the Angelic Mind channel. Today's tutorial is going to be a beginner's guide to Adobe Illustrator. The last 3 tutorials were on Photoshop and how to edit and manipulate photos. But what I want to do today is I want to help get you guys started in Illustrator by showing you some of the basic things that you need to know and explain differences between Photoshop and Illustrator and why you should use one tool over the other for certain tasks. I've seen many people use Photoshop for everything. They'll use it for manipulating photos and they'll use it for drawing and creating vectors as well. And a question that a lot of people have is, should I subscribe to one tool over the other? And my answer for that is you actually should subscribe to using both if you want to be a good graphic designer. Many graphic designers such as myself use these tools together all the time. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Photoshop here. And when you're thinking about the differences between Photoshop and Illustrator, there are 2 words that come to mind that really set these apart. And for Photoshop, that word is raster. Photoshop was built for photos, which, I mean, is anyone surprised by that? It's called Photoshop, and it's called that for a reason. So what Photoshop does is it uses a pixel-based format for showing images. And this is where it gets a bit confusing because you can bring vectors and make vector shapes in Photoshop. You use the shape tools or the pen tool. You can do that, but the important thing to keep in mind is that it was built to be a raster or pixel-based program. So I have an image open here in Photoshop, and I will provide a link in the description down below where you can download this image if you'd like. And you'll notice that from a distance it looks like a good, high quality, sharp image. But I'm going to start zooming in here. And you'll notice that as we go into this photo, the pixels that make up this photo become more apparent, as to where now it just kind of looks like a abstract image with a bunch of different gradients. But what these are individual pixels that make up an image. So this right here is the core of Photoshop. Photoshop was built to create images that are based on a bunch of different pixels that give you a ton of different options on how to manipulate those pixels and make them work together to create the kind of image you want to create. So it's pretty simple. When you think of Photoshop, think rasters, pixels. Alright, so I'm going to go back over to Illustrator. And as you can see, I have the exact same image open here in Illustrator that I did have open in Photoshop, as well as a vector drawing of a squirrel right next to that. Now in Illustrator you can do some basic Photoshop filters, so let's go to Effect, and you'll see right here where it says Photoshop Effects, and you have all these different filters. You've probably seen these in Photoshop before. So in Illustrator you can do some cool things that you can also do in Photoshop as well, but we got to keep in mind that that really is not what Illustrator was built for. Illustrator is a tool that was built for a vector-based workflow. So the key word there is vector. Vectors are points, lines, and curves that are based on mathematical equations rather than solid colored squared pixels. So I'm going to try to show you guys an example of this here. So first I'm going to zoom in on the squirrel. Alright. And now I'm going to go over to the image. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. So do you see the difference? Alright, and to make another example of this, I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool. And I'm just going to paint something. Alright, That is nice. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in on what I just painted here. Okay. And you'll notice that no matter how far we zoom in here, the edges still look crisp and sharp, and we are not losing much of the image's quality. So let's do the same thing in Photoshop. So I'm going to go over to Photoshop. I'm going to go over to this other document I have here. And you can see I have already painted something. So let's go in on this this wonderful piece of art that I created here. Okay, so you'll see as we zoom in here, the core of this image is a pretty rich dark black, but let's go up. Now you'll see that it starts to blend into more of a lighter black, and then a gray, and then eventually to white. And you'll notice as I'm zooming out here how soft and pixelated these edges look. So those are just, some of the things you got to keep in mind when you're thinking about the differences between Photoshop and Illustrator. When you draw something in Photoshop or in any pixel-based program, when you try to resize the image to a larger scale, it's almost impossible to do that without losing the quality of your image. But with vectors, you can blow them up to pretty much any size you want, and you will not lose any quality in that image. Alright, so I'm going to jump over to Illustrator now. What I want to do now is I want to show you guys the basics that you will need to get started in Illustrator. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, New. Now as you can see, we have different options here for mobile, web, and print. And right now I'm going to start off with a print document. So whenever I'm setting up a print document, I like to do it in inches. And we'll start with just a standard 8.5 by 11. And in any print document, you'll want to apply a bleed. And what a bleed does is it allows you to create objects such as backgrounds or other elements that will go off the page without getting cut off. I'll explain a little more about bleeds probably in another video. I'm gonna just go ahead and create this. Right? I'm gonna hit Command R to turn my rulers on. And one of the first things I want to show you guys is these rulers. If you go over to them, click and drag. See that line there? Those are called guides. And what these guides do is they help you to align and sort of balance everything. So these are going to be important to keep in mind probably for a later tutorial. Alright, so one of the first things I want to talk to you guys about is workspace. So let's go up to Window, Workspace, and as you can see I already have my own workspace set up here, and these are just all the panels that I like to have available for my use when I'm working on stuff. So what I want you guys to do for now is I want you to go to Window, Workspace, and go to Essentials. And Essentials will have pretty much everything you need for today's tutorial. So one of the first tools I want to show you guys is this one right here. This is called the rectangle tool, but if you right click on this, you'll see all these different options that we have. We have the rectangle, the ellipse, polygon, star tool, and the line segment tool. So let's start with the rectangle tool. And all you got to do with this is just click and drag until your rectangle is the size that you want it to be. On this tool, if you hold Shift, click and drag, you'll see it'll make a perfect square. Just move that over a bit. Right now I'm going to right click and go to my ellipse tool, click drag, and this will make some circular shapes. And with this tool, if you hold Shift, click and drag at the same time, it makes a perfect circle. Alright. Now I'm going to go to we got the polygon tool, the star tool, okay, so I'm going to delete all this. And one quick thing I want to show you guys, artboard tool. So what this does is it grabs your document, and you can come down here to the corner and resize it. And if you hold down Option on your Mac and click and drag out, it makes another artboard. So if you just finished setting up your document and you're like, damn, I meant to have, I don't know, 2 pages instead of 1. Well, you can actually go and edit your artboards. So again, Option. Now I got a 3rd page. So just a quick tip on how to make changes to your document if you just got done setting it up. Okay, so let's see. I think I'm gonna maybe create a little design here. So I will start with the rectangle tool. I'm just gonna make a rectangle. Okay. Let me zoom in a bit. Now if I drag my mouse over this circular thing here and click and drag, you will see that it does that. It makes the edges more circular, or the corners, makes the corners more circular. Okay, now I'm going to give this guy a fill. So I'm going to have him selected with my selection tool. Hit V for that tool, and then I'll explain the direct selection tool later. Alright, so I'm going to give this guy a fill. I have my swatches palette open here, and to open your swatches palette, just go to Window, Swatches, or you can double click this guy right here, and you could give it a fill. I think I'm going to go with that dark blue. Hit OK. Alright, and I'm going to make another layer here, and I'm probably going to make another shape, probably another rectangle. And the reason why I made another layer, just like how we use layers in Photoshop, we also want to be using them in Illustrator as well. I can't stress enough how much easier doing everything in layers and getting down the proper layer management. I can't tell you how much easier that's going to make your life. Because when you're trying to go back and delete things, but then you decide that the thing you deleted is something you want back, much easier if you have things in layers. Alright, now I'm going to make another layer. I'm going to go to my text tool. I'm going to lock these 2 layers that are beneath it. And with my text tool, we want to click and drag to make a box. Okay, hit delete. And you'll see over here in my properties panel, we've got all these different options for things that you can do with text. So this is align left, you'll see align center, align right, the point size adjustment. You can change the font and whether you want it to be bold, italic. So, alright, I'm gonna center my text for now. And I'm just gonna type something. Okay. Now I'm gonna, with my text tool, I'm gonna highlight that. I'm gonna come down here. I'm gonna highlight that and then use my arrow key to go up or down. And I'm gonna bring this up to a size that I'd say that 34 is pretty good there. Grab my selection tool to bring it down. I want it right in the middle of that white rectangle. I'm going to grab my text tool again, and I think I'm going to pick a different font. So to do that, I'm going to go type font. Let's see, I'm going to try this one here. Okay, that looks pretty good. As I zoom in on this here, you'll see that even the text is still a vector in Illustrator because I'm not losing any quality or sharpness on this text here. But if you want to edit it a little bit more, what you'll have to do is you'll have to take this text and change it into outline. And before you do that, always there is a spell checker on here. Always run the spell checker or have somebody proofread your stuff or proofread it yourself just to avoid any spelling or grammar errors. Okay, so everything's good there. I'm going to come up here and go to type, create outlines. And now that I just did that, what Illustrator does when you hit create outlines is it no longer recognizes this as text, it recognizes what is selected here as a shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup, and now let's say I want to make one of the letters look different than the rest. So I'm going to select this N here, for example. Zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to use my direct selection tool, and this will select the anchor points on your image. So let me double click that, and it edits the anchor points. So I'm going to drag this anchor point out to here, and maybe this one there like that. And that one down there. Right. So as you can see, that's just one way that I manipulated that text, but there are a ton of different ways that you can play around, manipulate your text in Illustrator. I do think Illustrator gives you more options as far as what to do with your text, because once you convert your text to outline, it recognizes it as a vector shape. Okay, so I'm gonna delete this. Let me unlock those. Alright. But the last, but probably the most important tool that I want to show you guys is the pen tool. And you can hit P on your keyboard instead of having to click on it. And what the pen tool does is it creates different anchor points as well as handles to create an image, right? So how it works is you'll want to go to wherever you want to start your line segment, and we're just going to do straight lines. So I'm going to click, 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 and now in order to close your path on the pen tool, you'll want to click on the anchor point, the very first anchor point that you started. And that closes our path. No fill on that. Okay. For straight lines, all you have to do is just click, and that's it. But now for curvy lines, that's a little bit different. So for curvy lines, we're going to grab our pen tool. We're going to click on where we want our segment to start. And we're going to go over to where we want our segment to end. And now we're going to click and drag. And now you see this handle. This handle is what's helping to create this curve in this line segment. Okay, release. As you can see, it has created the same curve. So if I go to click somewhere else, it's just gonna have this same curve in mind. So to get rid of that, what you're gonna do is you're gonna hit Option, and that kind of brings it to the direct selection tool. And we're gonna drag this back to this anchor point here. And now it's a straight line again. So what I'll do is I'll come about here. I'll create a different curve. Like, yeah, something like that. I'm going to hit Option and drag this handle to the anchor point to end that curve. Now I'm going to click on the first anchor point that I created here. Click, drag to make another curve. Alright, so I'll do that again here. I'm gonna click where we want to start, go out to where we want to end, click, drag. And now this time I'm going to hit Option, and instead of moving my handle back to the anchor point, I'm going to move it to about maybe right there. We'll see what that does. And now I'm going to come over to where my first anchor point was, click, make another curve there. Alright, now I'm going to hit Option to end this curve and drag it back to the anchor point. Click on my first anchor point to end the path, and drag out to make another curve. You'll see how that created a kind of a weird, funky 3D sort of shape there. So now I am going to try to bring in an image here that will help us practice with the pen tool. So I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm just going to look for image that I have saved on my desktop here. And I'm going to click to place that there. And one thing that I forgot to mention, when you are resizing things in Illustrator, you always want to go to the corners and you want to hit Shift. Because when you go to these edges here and just try to drag it, it's going to do it disproportionately. So to do it proportionately, what we want to do is we want to go to the corners and we want to hit Shift. And that has made the image larger without getting it all out of proportion. So that is just one important thing to keep in mind. Okay, so I'm going to lock this layer 1 here. I'm going to go up to my second layer. And now this is where we get our practice in. I will try to provide a link in the description down below where you can download this exact image. But if I can't, if you just Google pen tool practice, there are plenty of images that you can use just to practice with the pen tool. Okay, so I'm going to hit P for pen tool. Zoom in. Now here is where my segment will begin. You'll see it's a curve. So what we want to do is click, drag to where we see that handle ending. It made a curve. We want to click on that. Click, drag to where our handle here matches the one that's behind it. Now for this, we're just going to hit Option. We're going to click and drag this up to this handle here. And now we're going to make another curve. So we're going to go up to our next point, click, drag until the red handle matches the purple one behind it. And now we need to end this curve and come sort of down here and start a new one. So I'm gonna hit Option and drag this handle to about right there. And then I'm gonna come over to the next anchor point, click, drag so those match. And again here. And now I'll come down here, do the same thing, click, drag. Alright. And I'm going to drag this handle here so it matches what's going on in the image behind it. Okay. Click, drag to create this curve. Right, hit Option and drag it down to this handle here. And now, just gonna come up here. Alright, we want this handle to match what's going on here, so let's hit Option, drag it there. Now here's our next point, click, drag. Now we're going to click until we have a handle matches there, and now we're going to take this handle here, we're going to drag it to here, and that'll help sort of start us on our next curve. So Option, we're going to drag it out, and then go down to this anchor point here, click, drag. And looks like everything is matching up. Okay, so now we got to get started on his tail here. So in order to do that, we're going to grab this handle, hit Option, and we're going to drag it up to this next handle point thing there. You can see how that kind of helps get us started. Alright, I'm going to come up to the next anchor point, click, drag, and that looks pretty good. We're going to shorten this. Now, same thing, just click and drag until the handles match. Alright, we're going to come here. Click, drag. Now we want this handle down here to match that one, so hit Option and drag it up to there. Okay, hit Option again to drag that where it needs to go. Alright. And it's click, drag, and hit Option to make sure everything is matching once again. And now we'll come down here. And now we can close our path. And also want to let you guys know you can grab this direct selection tool here and edit your anchor points and your handles here. So if you want to make it a different curve, you can just grab that. Make sure you click on your anchor point. So first, and then you can go and edit your handles. And you can move your points around as well. So, alright. Alright, so as you can see, I'm going to turn my layer 1 off. And I got a pretty good vector drawing of a squirrel. So I want to show you guys a little bit about gradients, and what gradients are is they are color transitions. So I'm going to select my squirrel here. We'll start with maybe just a black fill. And now I got my gradient window open. And if you don't have that open, just go to Window and Gradient. And once that check mark is next to it, you'll see the panel appear. So now that I have my image selected, I'm going to come over here to Gradient. I'm going to pick that more round one. Okay. Now I'm going to come down to here, and where you see this black gradient slider, I'm going to double click. That brings up another swatches panel. Now I'm going to hit red. Alright, as you can see how the red is slowly fading out and transitioning into that white. So that is what a gradient does. It's one color and then it transitions into another, and you can have as many colors in a gradient as you like, I believe. Alright, so with my image selected, I can come down here and add another color if I want. So once you see this plus thing appear, click, and that adds another slider. So I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to add maybe a blue. And now I can go in and edit that and change that around. And you can hit Command Z to undo, because I think I just like the, yeah, I think I like that better. And that is it on gradients. Like I said, feel free to try to find this image. I'll try to provide a link for it if I can. But if I can't find an image, just Google practice with the pen tool, and there are plenty of images you can practice with. The pen tool is a tool that it's a little bit difficult to learn at first, but once you really get used to it and you get the hang of it, it's like your best friend. Yeah, it's going to be one of the main tools that any graphic designer or illustrator will be using. That is it, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, feel free to let me know your thoughts, feelings, questions, and concerns in the comment section down below. Once again, thank you, and remember to create something awesome today.